It was Sam who saw it first. Said he was out hunting with his dad down by the Central Lake. Central Lake didn't mean anything real to us back then. If you could climb a tree and see nothing but trees in every direction, that was center enough. No matter which lake we wound up at, the woods always looked the same. Green walls, green ceiling, brown floor, and the vague feeling that the world outside school and cheap cereal and TV just stopped existing until you found your own back doorstep again. When I try to remember those woods now, it doesn't feel like remembering a real place. It feels like remembering a dream I had too many times. Walking without aim, tripping on roots, pushing through ferns and piles of old bricks half swallowed by moss. Then suddenly, blinding sun and the tick-tick-tick of the garden sprinklers, and my mom calling my name like I'd just been out front the whole time. Anyway, Sam swore it started like any other hunting trip. His dad had the rifle slung over his shoulder and a torch in his hand, the big heavy one with the rubber grip that always smelled faintly like petrol and metal. They hardly talked because that's how his dad liked it. They'd walk for an hour or two in that weird gray evening light. Stop, listen. Eventually Sam would spot a deer, and his dad would press the torch in his hands and tell him to hold it steady, in that voice that meant, do not fuck this up. We used to tease him for how his hands shook. The way he'd describe it, he'd be trying so hard not to breathe too loud that his heartbeat would wobble the beam. But every time, the same dumb thing happened. The deer would freeze. Torchlight washed over it, and it locked up like someone hit pause. We always laughed at that part. Why don't they just run? Tom would say, if some big idiot pointed a light at me in the dark, I'd be gone. Back then I thought the same. Now I don't. Now I think about that reaction way too much. That glitch in them. You know, that moment when something so wrong steps into your world that your brain just buffers? Where it's not fear yet, because fear needs you to understand at least a little bit of what you're dealing with. Before that, there's this blank gap where you're just staring, waiting for the world to make sense again. I know that feeling now. I didn't then. The way Sam told it, the deer dropped clean. He went down like a rag doll, Sam said, both hands in the air, showing how it folded. Didn't even twitch. Dad reckons he hit an artery or something. Said it looked young, caused the antlers hadn't really come in yet. His dad passed him the torch again to hold while he went to sort the body. The ground was hard and cold and smelled like rust and mud. Sam said he was staring at the little white nubs on the buck's skull, thinking how weird it was that something that dead could still look soft when he noticed the light. There was a light in the trees, he said, beyond the deer, like way back. I remember exactly how I said it, like the smug prick I was. So, another hunter. He rolled his eyes so hard his whole head moved. Do you think I'd be telling you this if it was just some guy with a torch? We were in Finn's living room when he told us. The four of us crammed around this low coffee table with permanent ring stains from mugs nobody ever bothered to use coasters for. The TV was on low behind us, showing some game show nobody watched. The whole place smelled like stale chips and that damp carpet smell that never really leaves once it sinks in. Sam leaned forward like we were about to hear the twist in a ghost story. It wasn't a beam, he said. It was like a ball, a bluish ball, and it wasn't shaking around like someone was walking with it. It just floated, like it was on rails. He cupped his hands like he was holding it. It slid along the tree line, slow, and then it just dipped down and vanished. No beam, no speed, just a ball. He sat back, clearly pleased with himself. None of us reacted the way he wanted. Okay, Tom said, nodding slowly. So, some camper had a weird lamp. Riveting mate. Sommes nostrils flared. You're such a dick sometimes, you know that. I'm not saying you're lying, Tom said, still laughing. I'm saying your story's shit. Sam slumped back in the armchair and crossed his arms. He had that sulky look he got whenever anyone called him out on his UFO stories. The Bigfoot one nearly broke us as a group for a week. I thought that was going to be the end of it. Then Finn cleared his throat. He didn't do that much. Finn didn't insert himself into conversations. He kind of hovered at the edges of them, chipping in when forced. So when he raised his hand a little like we were in class, all three of us looked. I saw something like that too, he said. Sam sat up immediately. Like what? The light. Yeah. Since when do you go hunting? Tom said. Finn stared at his hands. I don't. We waited. The TV made an audience laugh at something in the background, the sound thin and cheap. I ran away a few nights ago, Finn said. None of us were surprised. That's the worst part. Finn's parents weren't really his parents. We'd figured that out from the paperwork on the fridge long before he ever admitted it. They were the kind of foster people who treated him like a job. Food was there, technically. Clothes were there, technically. Anytime we were over, you could hear them arguing through the walls about money, never about Finn himself. We used to call him Peach because he bruised easy and he hated showing his arms in PE. Not our finest moment. Kids are little monsters even before anything external gets involved. When did you leave? I asked. He scratched at a scab on his knuckle. Late. They were drunk. Again. I didn't want to hear it. He told us he slipped out the back door because the front made too much noise. The yard behind their house backed right onto the woods. One broken fence plank and you were in. He didn't take a bag. Just the cheap wind-up torch he kept under his bed and the clothes he had on. The night was wet and cold and full of fog that clung to the trees like cobwebs. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he didn't want to be anywhere near that house. He described it in pieces, not in order. Leg muscles screaming, branches slapping his face. That weird, heavy quiet you get when it's late enough that even the birds can't be bothered. There's this squelching sound under my boots, he said, eyes half closed like he was watching in his head. Like walking on soaked bread. But when I'd stop and check with the torch, the ground looked dry. Just dead leaves. I could picture him, skinny arms, too big hoodie, cranking that stupid torch every few minutes because the light on those things always faded exactly when you needed it. The beam on his was this sickly yellow that made everything look diseased. He talked about owls. Foxes yipping somewhere out of sight. Something else, too. A noise he couldn't place. It sounded like someone trying to whistle without knowing how, he said. Like they were forcing air out, but it kept catching. Sort of half shriek, half. I don't know. A kettle that doesn't quite boil. He kept running until his chest felt tight and hot, and his legs turned rubbery. Eventually, he dropped to his knees, hands landing in something soft. The smell nearly knocked me out, Finn said, his face twisting even in the living room, days later. Like meat that's been left in a bin for a week. Wet heat, but the air was cold. Does that make sense? He'd landed on a stag, or what used to be one. When he cranked the torch and shone it down, the light hit dead glassy, eyes bulging in a head too swollen to be real. The skin was stretched, tight and rounded, like a balloon full of soup someone had painted fur onto. He'd fallen right on its belly. His fingers sank in up to the knuckles before he jerked them back. His hands came away sticky with something that wasn't quite blood and wasn't quite anything else. There was something inside it, he whispered, like bits of metal or something. I thought I cut myself on bone at first, but it was smooth, hard. He leaned closer, fighting the urge to puke, and pressed his fingers gently into the grotesque swell of its stomach. The skin didn't resist like normal. It gave, and something shifted under there. The beam caught it, something glinting in amongst the black sludge that oozed from the split he'd made. Teeth, Finn said. It was packed with teeth. Not in a mouth, just floating around in there. Human teeth. Deer teeth. I don't know. Just teeth. I laughed then. I wish I could say I didn't. Tom flat out snorted. No, fuck off, Tom said. That's not even a good lie. Finn flinched like he'd been hit. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm telling you what I saw, he muttered. He didn't get to finish his story properly before the noise came back in it. That whistling not whistling. Only this time, in his memory, it was much closer. He said the sound rose and felt like someone testing how lungs worked. Too fast, too slow like it was learning. He looked up from the sagging deer and saw them. Blue lights, he said to us. Like Sam's, but lower. They were sliding along the forest floor. Not floating, like beads rolled down a slope. And then they were gone. He described how they moved. Not quite smoothly, not quite randomly. Like they were feeling their way along. That was when he stopped running away from home and started running back. Or tried to. He said every tree looked the same, every direction wrong. He didn't remember how he got home, only that he woke up in his own bed with leaf mold under his nails and his foster dad shouting that breakfast was getting cold. We all sat with that for a moment. Tom broke it first. "Yeah, right," he said, dragging the words out. "Good imaginative effort, lads. Fin is déclenché. You don't have to believe me." "I don't know, man," I said quietly. "Finn doesn't really lie about this kind of stuff." Tom swiveled to look at me, offended. "This kind of stuff? Jake, he just told us he elbow-deeped a deer full of teeth." "Teeth? You know that's not how bodies work, right?" "Leave off him," I muttered. Sam jumped back in, desperate not to lose control of the story. "I saw something weird too, okay? You know I chat shit sometimes, but I'm being serious about this one." "You also saw Bigfoot last summer," Tom snapped, "and Mothman the year before, and that UFO that turned out to be a Chinese lantern." "All right, fine. I made some of that up," Sam said. "But there was a light. I swear. Proper X-Files shit. Ask my dad." "We can't ask your dad," Tom said. "Your dad thinks a vegetable is anything that isn't meat." I could feel it boiling under the surface already, the argument. The old roles. Sam the exaggerator. Tom the skeptic. Me stuck in the middle. Finn trying to disappear into the sofa. "Guys," I said, palms against the table. "There's one way to shut everyone up." They all looked over. "We go out there tonight," I said. "We go to the woods. We find the lights. Or don't. Either way, it's sorted." Tom recoiled like I'd suggested we burn his house down. "My parents will never let me." "Mine don't give a shit," Finn said. "Mine neither," Sam added. "They think I'm upstairs every night. I could be halfway to Scotland, and as long as I'm back by breakfast, they wouldn't notice." "Have they ever actually stopped you going out?" I asked Tom. "Like physically stopped you?" "Well, no. So what are you scared of?" "Them being pissed off," he said. "Obviously, easier to ask for forgiveness than permission," I said. "What are they going to do? Ground you from the woods after the fact?" He chewed his lip. I watched the moment it tipped. Tom hated being the only one who said no to anything. "All right," he said at last, punching me lightly in the shoulder. "Fine. We'll go. Peach, we'll meet behind your place at 9. We'll click our torches on and off 3 times, so you know it's us and not, some teeth-hoarding deer." Finn nodded once. We didn't talk much on the way there. Me and Tom cut through the estate and crossed the narrow strip of grass that pretended to be a park. The sky was clear, which somehow made it worse. No clouds to hide behind, just a big, open black nothing with pinpricks of cold light. We hit the line where suburb ended and trees began and just stopped. The woods at night are not the woods in the day with the brightness turned down. They're a different animal altogether. You know how, during the day, you can see the depth? Layers of branches, leaves moving in the wind, dappled sun on the ground. At night, all that collapses. The trees become a wall. Everything behind that first row is just swallowed. Tom hugged himself, rubbing his hands up and down his arms like it would help. "We could still just go back," he said. "Say we tried and your batteries died. And then listen to Sam telling this story forever?" I said, "No chance." The smell hit me first when we stepped under the canopy. Damp, soil that had been wet so long it forgot what dry felt like. Something musky underneath, like animal fur and old sweat. The air felt heavier. Not colder, exactly, just more present. I could feel it sitting on my skin. When I stepped, the ground had this weird, brittle crunch that didn't match the smell at all. Like walking across old cereal. We didn't even need to say it. We both switched our torches on and kept them on, even though we'd agreed earlier to save the batteries. The beams wobbled through trunks and brambles, catching bits of white bark that flashed like faces in the distance. The faint hiss of the motorway, usually this constant background thing, was already muffled. Each step we took swallowed it a little more. A branch snapped behind us, and I almost swallowed my tongue. "What the?" "Relax," a voice said. "It's just me." Sam stepped out of the dark with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Over his shoulder was his dad's rifle, barrel pointed to the ground. Tom stared at it. "The fuck is that for?" "You've clearly never been out here at night," Sam said. "There's foxes and badgers and shit. Plus, if we see some kind of skinwalker deer thing, I'm not about to have a stick in my hand like an idiot." "Your dad just let you take it?" I asked. Sam scratched the back of his neck. "He's passed out. I left a note saying I'd locked it away already." Technically, future me isn't lying. Tom snorted. The sound died quickly in the trees. We did the torch signal at exactly 9. 3 quick clicks in unison, like some secret code we'd made up on the spot. The house lights at the back of Finn's place were off, but he burst out of the hole in the fence so fast you'd swear he'd been waiting pressed against it. "Jesus," Tom said, eager. Finn ignored him. He was already breathing a little too fast, eyes wide, pupils huge in the torchlight. It wasn't excitement. It was something else. We all turned at once and faced the trees proper. From Finn's house, the woods just went straight back for as far as we'd ever dared go. Our big, clever plan was this. If we walked in a straight line, we could just turn around later and walk straight back. We kept to that line for a while. But logic doesn't work in there. Not the way you want it to. We walked for what felt like hours. It probably wasn't. Time stretches when you're trying not to be the first one to say, "I'm scared." Conversations came in short bursts. "Sam, what if it's like government tech or something? Like some drone test?" "Tom, yeah, because if there's one thing the government loves, it's our shit little town." "Fuh, shut up. Listen, you hear that?" Mostly though, we were quiet. Anytime one of us did talk, it felt wrong. Like our voices were intruding on something they weren't meant to be part of. Even the owls felt muted. I remember seeing one, high up on a branch, big round eyes catching the torch beam, beak opening and closing without making sound. Just this silent little pantomime of a bird arguing with itself. We walked until even the idea of the motorway was gone. No distant cars. Just crunch, breathe, crunch. The sky opened up a little ahead, and that's how we knew we'd reached water. The trees thinned, and suddenly the ground fell away in a gentle slope down to a black sheet of lake, the surface broken up by ripples that caught the moon. The air got colder near the shore. The water smelled metallic and clean in a way the woods didn't. Waves, small and glassy, lapped at the mud and weed, soaking the tips of our shoes when we got close enough. "This is it," Sam said, stepping forward. "This is the lake. How the hell do you know?" Tom asked. Sam pointed down the shore to a stained patch of dirt, darker than the rest. The torchlight made it look almost purple. "That's where the deer went down. Me and Dad bled him out right there." The night wrapped tight around my ears. For a moment, all I could hear was the tiny smack of the water against the bank and my own breathing. We edged around the lake, keeping as close to the water as we could without falling in. Little bugs skated on the surface like they were dancing in slow motion, drifting toward the open mouth of a fish that snapped them up one after the other, each one unaware until it was too late. I remember thinking, stupidly, we're like that. We just don't know what's at the end yet. The lake narrowed as we went. The waves calmed. The shore rose up in this messy hump of dirt and rock and roots. The sound of that almost whistle slid into earshot like someone turning up a radio in another room. Finn grabbed my sleeve. "Hear that?" We all stopped. It was there, clear as anything now. That breathy, broken whistling, rising and falling. Sometimes it sounded close, sometimes like it was miles away, even though we hadn't moved. We crept around a big boulder, boots sliding in loose stones, and saw the pit. There was a den dug into the side of the bank. A mouth in the earth, ringed with roots and torn soil, sloping down into black. The smell rolled out from it in a wave. Rot and damp fur and something chemical like bleach gone bad. The whistling built to a peak and then cut off like someone hit stop. And then there was light. A pulse of blue flared from inside the pit, bright enough that we all flinched. It wasn't like a torch beam spilling in a cone. It was contained. A round, solid ball that surged up into view and then ducked back down, gone in an instant. No one said a word, even Tom. Finn's face split into this wild, vindicated grin. He turned and looked straight at Tom with his eyebrows halfway up his forehead. "Told you," he mouthed. Tom's mouth opening and closing in disbelief would have been funny anywhere else. The sound hit us before anything else did. Something shrieked. Not the whistle. This was deeper, raw, like metal being twisted in slow motion and someone screaming through a throat full of blood at the same time. It poured out of the den and into the air around us, thick and physical. Then came the other noises. Grunts, snorts, bit bops, bones knocking inside something big. A shape heaved itself up out of the pit. For a second, all we saw was movement, a bulk unfolding, dragging strips of shadow with it. Sam's hands were shaking already by the time the thing fully rose. He had the rifle gripped so tight the knuckles went white. "It's a deer," he breathed. It was sort of tall, way taller than it should have been. The legs were wrong, joints bending at angles that made my knees hurt to look at. The torso swelled and collapsed in patches like it was filled with shifting liquid. The head looked too smooth, like the bones underneath had been softened and pushed around. It sucked in a huge, ragged breath, sides ballooning, then let it out in one long, rattling howl that made my teeth ache. Then it jumped. 1 second, it was in front of us, half out of its grave. The next, it was over us, a blot of shadow blotting out the stars for a heartbeat. We ducked instinctively, all 4 of us pressing flat to the mud as it sailed overhead. Its hooves hit the shore on the other side with a sound like someone slamming a cupboard door. Then it ran. Seeing it move was worse than seeing it still. It sprinted along the lake, legs pumping, neck jerking with each stride, the whole body lagging behind itself. Like every part of it was running to catch up with its own skin. We watched it disappear into the trees, the shrieks trailing off into the dark. Tom was gasping, clutching his chest. "What the fuck was that?" "Jesus Christ," Sam said. I've never seen them do that. I've never seen anything move like that." Finn had already edged closer to the pit, torch in hand. He cranked it furiously and pointed it down. "Guys," he called, "you need to see this." We joined him on the rim. The beam cut down into a bowl carved out of the earth, maybe 2 men deep. The bottom was carpeted with deer, or what was left of them, not stacked neatly, just pressed together by their own weight, the bodies flattened and dried like someone had lain them out and rolled over them with something heavy until they were all the thickness of blankets. They didn't look rotted so much as used. Hollow, fur sucked tight against ribs, eyes sunken into skulls, limbs splayed at impossible angles. Sam prodded one with the butt of the gun. The skin dented, stayed dented. A neat little hole where the barrel didn't spring back at all. Something had emptied them out. "The light came from in there," Finn said, nodding at the far side of the pit. There, half hidden by earth and old leaves, was a tunnel entrance. A round hole, just big enough for a kid to squeeze into if they were stupid enough. It breathed cool air at us. I could feel it on my face. "I can't fit in there," Tom said immediately. He was the biggest of us, broad in a way the rest of us hadn't grown into yet. "No way." "Yeah, you can," Finn said. "Look, it dips down and then opens up into a chamber, see?" He swung the torch inside, and you could just about make out the way the floor dropped, then leveled off. "You crawl through the tight bit, then you're fine. It's not that long." Tom hunched in on himself, shoulders up by his ears. "Okay, you've both proven I'm wrong, congrats. We saw your magic lights. Can we please go home now?" Finn's eyes were shining, and it had nothing to do with the torch. "No, don't you get it? There's something here, something you don't see at school, or on TV, or in the shitty high street. This is ours. We could be the only people who ever see it." "I've seen enough," Tom said. "My brain's full. I'm going." He turned, but I could tell he didn't really want to walk away alone. The woods behind us looked darker now, like they knew we'd seen too much. "What do you think, Jake?" Finn asked. Sam was looking at me too. So was Tom. but his eyes were saying something different. Be sensible. Please. Just this once. I should have listened. Instead, the thought that filled my head was, I've spent my whole life in these woods, and they've never given me anything like this. I'm not leaving now. I say we check it out, I said. My voice didn't even shake. Finn grinned, broad and sharp. Knew you would. Tom groaned. Of course you do. Of course you fucking do. Sam hovered, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Do we all go in? I mean, maybe one of us stays out here. You know, watch our backs. I didn't clock it for what it was then. I thought he was being cautious. Later, I'd replay that line over and over, wondering when exactly he decided to save himself. The tunnel was tighter than it looked, even for me, and I was the skinniest. I went after Finn, breathing his damp trainers and sweat, feeling the earth pressing in on my shoulders. There was no smell of fresh soil. It was all old dirt and mold and that same undercurrent of animal rot. My elbows dug into crumbly walls that came away in dusty clumps. Roots pushed through the ceiling and sides, small and pale like veins. Every time my laces snagged, I had to stop and yank my foot back, the fibers catching and snapping. It sounded more like breaking knuckles than snapping would. By the time I wriggled forward enough to feel space open up in front of me, my lungs were burning. Finn's torch sputtered, then flared as he cranked it from the chamber ahead. The light cast weird shadows on the walls. The roots looked like they were moving, twitching under the skin of the dirt. Tom's voice floated down the tunnel behind me, louder than it should have been in that box space. I'm stuck, he said. Finn's face, lit from below, grew serious. He crawled back to the edge of the chamber and leaned into the tunnel. No, you're not, he said. You're panicking. That makes you go rigid. You need to breathe and wiggle through. One knee, then the other, like we did on that cave trip. I can't, Tom said. His voice had picked up a pitch I'd never heard from him. I can't move my shoulders. It's too tight. Oh God. Oh fuck. I can't move. You can, Finn said, and for a second I saw something else in him. Not just a quiet kid. There was something hard there. Practical. Listen, I'm in a chamber. It opens up. You just have to get through the squeeze. If you can get halfway, you can get the rest. I could hear him breathing short, ragged pants. The walls around me vibrated with it. Sam. Finn called down the tunnel. You there? Silence. Sam, he shouted, louder, his voice bouncing back at us. Nothing. Then, faint, drifting in from the entrance, Tom laughed. Just once. A broken, not funny sound. He's gone, Tom said. He legged it. I heard the rifle rattling as soon as I crawled in here. He's fucking gone. Tin Man's gone back to his house. Don't call him that, I said automatically. Why not? Tom snapped. He is though. You heard him talk about those deer. He doesn't care. He just watches stuff die. He was never going to stick his neck out for us. Finn swore under his breath. Okay, it's fine. We'll get you through. Me and Jake can make a rope from our bag straps or something, loop it under your arms and pull. No, Tom said. No, I want out. Backwards. Tie it round my legs, not my chest. I want to go back, not further in. Tom, the way back is. It's where the sky is, Tom said, voice shaking. I don't care how far it is. I'm not going deeper in this thing. Please, just get me out. Finn closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and nodded once, like a commander making a call. All right, he said. We'll find another way out, then loop back round and get you from the outside. If this place has one entrance, it might have more. Just hang in there, okay? Leave me a light, Tom said. Please. What? I can't reach mine, he said. At my hip. If I move my arm, I swear to God this whole tunnel will crush me. Just leave a torch at the end, so I can see there's a way out. That was the part that really got me. Not the panic, not the swearing. The fact that, trapped as he was still thinking about not wanting to be left alone in the dark. Yeah, I said softly. Okay. I took my torch, set it on its side at the edge of the chamber, beam pointing down the tunnel back toward him. The light did this long, narrow stretch, turning the dirt into stripes. Don't be long, Tom called. Seriously, don't fuck off. We won't, Finn said. And then we turned away and walked further underground. We should have stayed. We should have tried harder right then. I know that. Believe me, I know that. But at the time, all I could think was, if we can find a second way in, this will all make sense. There will be structure. There will be exits and entrances like in the scout hut diagram for a fire drill. We moved from chamber to chamber. The tunnel system was more than just one straight tube. It looped and kinked and dropped, so that sometimes we'd find ourselves crawling on hands and knees and sometimes standing with our backs bowed. Finn's wind-up torch became our lifeline. We took turns cranking it when the beam faded. The noise of the handle whirring became a kind of metronome for my nerves. Everywhere, the walls were crowded with roots. Some were thin as hairs, some as thick as my wrist. They wormed through the earth and rock, twisting around each other, always curving toward the spaces where air was. Some pulsed slightly when the light hit them, like there was fluid moving inside. We didn't talk much. Words felt wasted here. When the torch went dim, we'd pause, hold our breath, and listen. That was when we started hearing it again, the knot whistle. At first, it was far away, coming and going like it was moving through another branch of the system. Then, as we shuffled into the 5th or 6th chamber, by then I'd lost count, it was suddenly close. "Jake," Finn whispered, grabbing my sleeve. "Listen." We pressed ourselves flat against one wall and killed the torch completely. The dark was total. Not the kind you get in your bedroom with the curtains drawn. The kind where your brain, desperate, starts putting shapes where there are none. The whistling slid into the chamber from one of the side tunnels. It pitched up and down, ill at ease in its own rhythm. It sounded wrong, not because it was high or low, but because the process behind it wasn't natural. It was like listening to someone trying to mimic music from a description. A glow appeared, soft at first, then stronger. It rounded the corner, a bluish orb about the size of a fist, sliding through the air about waist height. Then another followed it, bobbing slightly behind. They weren't bright enough to hurt, but they were bright enough to outline the whole chamber in ghostly shades. The roots on the walls looked like veins under skin. The two lights drifted in. They came as a pair, the whistling hitching every time they wobbled. One of them hesitated in the middle of the chamber, as if unsure which tunnel to take next. The other kept going. The first bumped into it. For something that looked weightless, the impact was weirdly solid. The second orb jolted sideways like it had been shoved and smacked into the wall just above our heads. It didn't explode. It didn't bounce. It hit the dirt and sank. There was a sound like someone slapping wet clay. The glow flattened, spread, forced itself into the cracks of the wall. It went from round to a weird, blotchy smear, its edges fraying as it pushed deeper. The light dimmed as it sank, leaving behind a patch of darker, damp soil. In the torchless dark, it was just a shadow, but I could feel something happening there. The hairs on my arms prickled. I fumbled for the torch handle, hands shaking and cranked. When the beam kicked in and I shone at the patch, the earth was changing. The dampness thickened, turning black and glossy like oil. Mold, or something like mold, bloomed across it in seconds, weaving into patterns that didn't look random, spirals and lines and curves that nearly made sense if you looked long enough. Roots grew toward it, fattening as they reached the spreading stain, merging with it. The whole patch swelled out from the wall, crawling into the chamber by inches. It bulged, then pinched in at 2 spots, then a third. The patterns on its surface dragged themselves into shape. Hollows appeared where nothing had been. There were eyes, a nose, a mouth. Not realistic. More like a child's drawing of a screaming face, but done in fungus and pulsing roots instead of pencil. The mouth widened, cracks appearing at the corners. The eyes opened without there being anything to open, just dark pits forcing themselves into existence. I swear it looked at us. The whistling cut off for the first time since the orb appeared. In the silence, the thing on the wall shuddered, as if breathing in. Then, as quickly as it had swollen, it sagged. The patterns unraveled back into chaos. The bulge deflated, cracking and falling away into powder that drifted down to pile at the base of the wall. Within seconds, all that was left, there was a smear of darker dirt and some disturbed roots. The surviving blue orb, the one that had plowed on through, hovered at the far side of the chamber as if waiting. Then it glided into the next tunnel and vanished. The broken whistle starting up again, more distant now. I realized I'd been digging my fingers into the floor so hard my nails hurt. François audible. What the fuck was that? He whispered. I didn't have an answer. We kept moving. Sometimes we heard more whistles, more glows drifting past side tunnels, never close enough to see clearly. Sometimes, exhausted, we just sat in the dark between torch cranks, backs pressed to the walls, feeling the whole place hum around us like a living throat. I thought briefly about turning back, but the idea of crawling past the torch we'd left for Tom and knowing he was wedged there, waiting, was somehow worse than whatever lay ahead. Besides, part of me, I hate admitting this, was fascinated. I was bored with my own life, bored with my dad's job at the warehouse, my mom's soaps, my friends' petty fights. The woods had finally coughed up something that wasn't just mud and trees. I wanted to see just how deep the wrongness went. We must have been down there for at least an hour after we left Tom. Might have been less. Might have been more. Tom didn't feel real in that place. It stretched and kinked like the tunnels. At some point, the air changed. We were in yet another chamber, bigger than the others, with the ceiling high enough that we could almost stand straight. Finn was crouched in the middle, torch beam running along the walls like he was looking for a map someone might have carved. I was leaning against the dirt, every muscle vibrating. Then I noticed it. Feel that, I said. Finn paused with the torch halfway up the wall. What? I lifted my head. The air. It's moving. Up until then, it had all been stale and thick. You breathed in, and it felt like you were just recycling the same old breath from 100 other lungs. But now there was a direction to it, a faint flow against my skin. Cool air brushing past my face toward the tunnel behind us. That means a way out, Finn said, standing up fully. Has to. Air's got to come from somewhere. Or go to somewhere, I said. He aimed the torch toward where the draft felt strongest. Not the tunnel we'd entered through, but a narrower one off to the right, partly hidden behind a bulge of earth. The opening was just high enough that we have to go on our bellies again. He didn't hesitate. That's the thing that stuck with me later. Finn, who used to shrink when his foster dad called from the next room, saw a hole in the wall of some subterranean nightmare and just went like he'd been waiting his whole life for an excuse. Come on, he said. If this goes up, we're laughing. Wait, I said. He stopped, half-crouched. What? I swallowed. We're really leaving him? Like this? For this long? I'd managed not to say Tom's name out loud. Saying it made him feel more real, like he was standing next to us, listening. Fin est déclenché. I told you. We find another way in, we can dig him out from the other side, or get adults, or I don't know. But we can't do shit from where we are now. You saw how tight that tunnel was. If we try to drag him from here, we just wedge him worse or cave it in. Yeah, but what if it collapses anyway while we're fucking about down here? I said, we won't even know. His eyes flashed in the torchlight. So what? You want to just sit there next to him until the battery runs out and we all suffocate together. The word hung in the air. Suffocate. I pictured the dirt coming down. My chest seized. He saw it land. His shoulders dropped a little. Look, he said, softer. We are trying to help him. This is just the shit version of that. But it's still trying. If we get out, we can bring people back who actually know what the fuck they're doing. Cavers. The police. Your dad. They'll get him out. This isn't on us. It sounded almost reasonable then. I nodded. Okay. We get out. We get help. We come back. Yeah, he said. Exactly. I didn't notice the way he didn't say we when he talked about coming back later. Didn't notice a lot of things. We dropped down and crawled into the new tunnel. This one sloped upward from the start. It was subtle at first, just enough to make my arms work harder, but then the angle sharpened. Dirt grated under my knees. My palms slipped on slick patches where moisture had gathered. The whistling sound faded behind us, or maybe it went sideways into another branch. Every now and then there'd be a faint echo of it, like someone trying the same broken note in a different room. The more we climbed, the colder the air got. My fingertips stung. I could smell water somewhere ahead. That clean, mineral smell lakes have when they've been left alone. Eventually, the roof of the tunnel dipped so low it scraped the back of my neck. The space pinched in again, like the earth resented every inch we stole from it. I swear to God, if I get stuck now too, I muttered. Don't, Finn snapped. Don't even say that shit. He was right in front of me. I could see the soles of his trainers, caked in a layer of pale dirt that didn't look like any soil I've seen above ground. His socks had bunched up around his ankles, exposing a strip of skin. There were thin purple bruises there, old and fading. Little thumbprints from some argument days before we decided this was the better option. My chest pressed against the floor. The space was tight enough now that when I breathed in, I could feel my ribs touch earth on both sides. That squeezed, hot feeling built in my throat. Don't panic, Finn said, like he could hear it. Look at my feet. Just keep going. One hand, one knee, the other hand, the other knee. Don't think about where you're not. So I thought about where I was instead. Deep underground. Woods above, lake somewhere nearby. God knew what, sliding through the tunnels behind us. Sam back topside, maybe halfway home by now, maybe not. Tom wedged in the dark with a torch he could see, but not reach. My hand hit rock instead of dirt. I yelped, scraping my knuckles. You all right? Finn called. Yeah, I shifted, found a gap, pushed my fingers into it. The rock felt cold and solid and real. I pressed my forehead against it for a second. It grounded me. There was more stone ahead. The tunnel changed from crumbly soil to packed dirt to sections of exposed rock like the bones of the hill. The angle eased. My shoulders had enough room to move again. Then Finn's foot disappeared. 1 second his trainer was there in front of me. The next, there was nothing but dark. Fum, I whispered. His reply came from slightly above me. Holy shit. Jake, we're out. You better not be joking. I'm breathing air that doesn't smell like a dead badger, he said. Come on. I dragged myself forward, elbows and knees clumsy now that I wasn't convinced the ground wanted to crush me. My head bumped rock, then root, then I was halfway through pulling myself up when my hands hit open space. Sudden huge. The absence of wall where you expect it is almost as scary as the presence of something you didn't want to meet. My body lurched, trying to correct for the lack of resistance. Finn grabbed my wrist and yanked. I flopped out of the tunnel like something being born. My chest hit cold air. My eyes, even in the weak torchlight, burned at the sudden space. We were on a slope, a few meters above what had to be the lake. I could smell it. I could hear it again, the gentle slap of water against the shore, the tiny clicks of stone and weed. The sky above us was a smeared mess of cloud and stars. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed it until I saw it again. My lungs dragged in cold air, and for a moment the only thing I felt was relief. Pure dumb relief. Then the relief curdled. Where's Sam? I asked. Finn shone the torch around. We were maybe 20, 30 steps from where we'd been earlier. The big boulder we'd rounded before was there, looming. The pit with the deer den was just beyond the slope, down near the waterline. The lake looked wrong, too still, like it was holding its breath. There was no sign of Sam, no footprints fresh enough to mean anything, no scuff marks from boots, no cigarette butts, and Sam always left those behind when he thought nobody was looking. Finn swung the beam slowly, nose wrinkling. He's gone, he said. Of course he's gone. Maybe he went for help, I said. We both knew that was bullshit. A scream ripped across the lake. Not one voice. Not even 10. Dozens. Layers of sound stacked on top of each other. High, low, young, old. Men, women, kids. All of them howling at once. Long and ragged, full of raw fear. The sound bounced off the trees, the water, the sky. I felt it in my chest before I understood it with my ears. Finn's head snapped toward the pit. "That's from Tom's side," he said, already running. My legs moved before my brain caught up. We slid down the slope, stones and dirt giving way under our feet. My thighs burned. Every step hurt, but stopping felt worse. The closer we got, the worse the sound got. It stopped being recognizable as voices and turned into this continuous, grinding wail. There were other noises under it, too. Cracks, squelches, pops, like an abattoir recorded and played backwards. By the time we hit the bank, my head was buzzing. I nearly went over on my ankle. Finn grabbed my arm and dragged me the last few steps to the rim of the deer pit. He cranked the torch hard enough that the handle clicked and protested. The beam stuttered on, flared, then steadied. He pointed it into the tunnel. The torch I left for Tom was still there at the entrance, half buried in smear mud. It was pointing down the tunnel, just like I'd set it. The beam was faint now, flickering. The circle of light on the dirt was small and sickly. Halfway down the tunnel, just within its reach, something filled the space. At first, my brain refused it. The torch glow gave us slices, not a full view. A strip of pale flesh here, a clump of hair there, the shiny curve of an eyeball, the stretched shape of lips. It took a second for my mind to stitch those slices together. When it did, my stomach turned inside out. The tunnel was plugged by people. Not whole people. Not bodies the way you've ever seen a body. It was like someone had fed a bunch of humans through a blender and then poured the result into a mold shaped like a nightmare of a man. Arms stuck out at wrong angles, some jointed in the middle with extra elbows, some ending in hands that had 6 fingers or more. Legs were stuck backwards and sideways, toes flexing against shoulders that weren't theirs. Bits of skin rubbed against bits of skin that had never been meant to meet. Everything was wrong. Limbs too long, limbs too short, flesh stretched tight in places, sagging loose in others. It all moved together in a slow, convulsing heave, like a single organism made of parts that belonged to different ones. Eyes bulged from every surface. Some were wide and round. Some were slit-like. Some were crushed half shut by the weight of the meat around them. They blinked out of sync, tears and blood leaking down whichever way gravity took them. Mouths. God, there were so many mouths. Some were where mouths should be. Most were not. Some opened sideways. Some were just holes rimmed with cracked lips, full of teeth that didn't match. Teeth crowded together, too many for the space. Teeth that were yellow, gray, black, sharpened, rounded, broken. They gnashed and clicked and chewed at nothing, at each other, at the air. The smell hit us full on, like a wall. Rot and shit and bile, and underneath all of that, something chemical and sharp like disinfectant gone moldy. The screaming we'd heard wasn't coming from one mouth. It was all of them at once, voices tangled so tightly they were no longer separate. Some of those voices sounded like kids our age. Some sounded older. Some were barely more than squeaks. Caught between breaths were words, maybe in languages I didn't know, or just sounds that wanted to be words and never got there. The mass shifted, pressing harder against the edges of the tunnel. Bone cracked somewhere inside it, a wet snap followed by a chorus of fresh screams. I dropped to my knees. My legs just gave out. The mud soaked through my jeans. My hands hit the ground, fingers digging in, nails bending. I could hear Finn, right next to me, starting to sob. There was nothing weak about it. It was just his body reacting the only way it knew how. I can't. Oh God, Tom, he said, voice breaking. Where is he? I said, I don't know why. Like we were gonna pick him out, like we'd see his face tucked somewhere in that mess if we looked hard enough. There was no way to tell. There were too many parts. A flash of familiar-looking skin here, a hair color there, but no pattern. It was like trying to spot a lost friend in a crowd by their elbow. The mass tensed. I could see it, now that my eyes had adjusted a little. There was a kind of rhythm to its movements. It would pull in, shuddering, the whole thing compressing, and then swelled back out, pushing against the earth. Every time it expanded, the tunnel walls shook. Bits of dirt and stone rained down on it, sticking to the sweat and slime. Roots snapped, hanging down in ragged strings. There was a sound from deep inside it. A new one, a thick, wet glub, like a huge bubble of air moving through viscous liquid. The noise traveled through the mass. You could track it by the reactions it caused. A line of screams that rose as something inside pressed against each piece on the way through. The whole creature? Construct? Spasm contorting around it. I wanted to look away. I couldn't. "Jake," Finn said. "Jake, we have to go. We have to fucking go." My brain was rooted. My body was too. All I could do was stare down that tunnel, the torchlight flickering on the meat wall. The wet bulge moved closer. You could see it now as a patch in the center of the mass where everything thinned, stretched, almost translucent. The mouths there opened wider, teeth scraping together, gums bleeding. Then something pushed through. There was a wet, explosive pop that sprayed blood and pus and God knows what else down the tunnel. It splattered across the floor, across the first rows of those flattened deer in the pit. A wave of new screams followed it. Something round and bright and blue tore out of the meat. It shot straight towards me. Reflex finally kicked in. I threw myself sideways, hands scrabbling in the mud. The thing whizzed past my face close enough that I felt the air move, hot and cold at the same time. It shot out of the tunnel mouth and up into the night like a flare. For a split second, it lit up the trees, the lake, even the underside of the clouds. Everything was carved in sharp detail in that weird cold light. Then it streaked away and vanished. Finn didn't wait to see where it went. The second it cleared me, he was up and running, boots squelching in the mud as he sprinted away along the bank. "Phone!" I shouted. He didn't look back, just kept going, the beam from his torch swinging wild, cutting slashes of light across the water and the trees, and then disappearing as he rounded the lake. I was alone with it. The screams shifted. They weren't just in front of me anymore. I could hear them behind my eyes. They vibrated in my teeth. Some of the mouths seemed to be forming shapes I recognized now, even if the words didn't fully land. "Please, stop, help, no," over and over. My whole body shook. My hands sank deeper into the mud. I felt small rocks under my fingernails, sharp and real and grounding. That was the only thing that kept me from blacking out. Then all at once the mass went quiet. Not slowly, not easing down, just off. Every mouth froze mid-wail. Every eye stopped blinking. The whole thing held in this horrible half-breath like it had been paused. The torch at the tunnel entrance flickered again. Its beam narrowed to a dot, then slit, then winked out entirely. The darkness rolled forward. There was a sound then, soft and fast, that I didn't know how to place until much later. Little wet splashes. Thuds. Things dropping in quick succession. The smell intensified. For 1 second, I thought the mass was collapsing. Then it moved again. Not outwards, not pushing this time. Inwards. Like a lung exhaling, it deflated. Skin slackened. Limbs loosened. The whole conglomerate sank back into the tunnel, withdrawing deeper. Not pulled by any visible force, just receding like it had decided this entrance was done. Lights. Hundreds of them. They bled out of it as it retreated. Little blue spheres, some small as marbles, some bigger than my fist. They seeped from gaps between limbs, dribbled out of mouths, oozed from my sockets. Each one shook itself free, hovered for a second, then zipped past me into the open air. The whistle came back with them, multiplied and layered, beautiful and horrifying all at once. They poured out of the tunnel in a stream. For a moment, the whole pit was lit up, deer husks painted in cold blue. Then the lights dipped. They sank into the flattened bodies. They didn't just pass through them. They joined with them like water, soaking in a dry cloth. Each deer's skin bulged once as it took a light, then lay still again. One by one, in a ripple, the deer moved. Twitches at first, little spasms in legs and necks. Then bigger jerks, jaws cracking open, eyes popping out of sunken sockets, reforming, clearing. Some of them tried to stand right away and failed, the insides not fully arranged. They collapsed onto the ones beneath them, setting off a chain reaction of motion. I stumbled back from the edge of the pit as hooves scrabbled. Antlers clacked against antlers. Fur rubbed fur. The smell shifted from dead to something in between. Not alive, not rotting, just wrong. They came up like a breaking wave. Deer scrambled to their feet, shaking off whatever residue they'd been marinating in. Some still had bits of the mass stuck to them, strings of meat, nodules of that black mold, even teeth embedded where they shouldn't be. They didn't seem to notice. They surged up the bank, out of the pit, eyes reflecting blue for a heartbeat before the hue snapped back to normal. Mostly, a few had eyes that stayed a little too bright. Those ones looked at me a fraction too long as they passed. I tried to get out of the way. I really did. But once the first ones reached my level, there was nowhere to go. Hooves thudded into my legs, my back, my shoulders. Not on purpose, not targeting. I was just an obstacle underfoot. Something heavy hit my right shoulder, hard enough to spin me. Pain flared, sharp and hot. I heard something tear, not fabric. Something else. I hit the ground face first and tasted mud and copper. A hoof clipped the back of my head, sending sparks across my vision. Another stomped on my calf. Another grazed my fingers, bending them back. By the time the last of them had thundered past, I was shaking in a puddle of my own breath, the night spinning. The earth still seemed to rumble with the herd's retreat. Splashing sounds marked where they hit the lake and kept going, legs churning through water. Eventually, the noise faded. The smell thinned. The deer's forms became nothing more than dark blurs between the trees. Then even those were gone. The woods breathed. Everything was quiet again. Too quiet. I rolled onto my side, groaning. My right shoulder throbbed like someone had shoved a hot coal into it. When I reached up to touch it, my fingers came away sticky. It wasn't just bruised then. The skin had split. I tried to pull my sleeve down to inspect it and hissed as the fabric stuck to the wound. It felt wrong. Not like a cut. More like something had entered then torn. I didn't know that then. I just knew I needed to move. I don't remember deciding to walk. I just remember walking. The woods swallowed the lake behind me. It tripped over roots. I bounced off trees like a pinball, changing direction whenever my path physically blocked. There was no plan to it. Every time I hit something, I turned and stumbled until I hit something else. At some point, the sky lightened. The black bled to dark blue, then a washed-out gray. Bird songs started up in hesitant bursts, like they weren't sure if the night was really over. The trees stopped being walls and became individual trunks again. I recognized a fallen log I'd used as a balance beam when we were younger. The ground underfoot grew more familiar, less tangled, more worn. And then, impossibly, stupidly, there was the back of my house. My own crappy fence, my mom's cheap plastic garden chairs, the wheelie bins, the curled hose. I stood there for a minute, just staring. Part of me expected the whole scene to ripple and melt back into trees, like I'd walked into someone else's dream. It didn't. The kitchen light was on. I could see the outline of my mom moving around inside. I climbed the fence in a clumsy scramble, dropping onto the little square of grass. My legs nearly gave out. Every part of me hurt. When I opened the back door and stepped into the kitchen, my mom screamed. It took me a second to realize why. I looked down and saw myself properly for the first time. My clothes were shredded and caked in mud. There were brown streaks that might have been dried blood or something worse. My face in the hallway mirror looked like it had been dragged through a hedge and then kicked. My hair was full of dirt and bits of leaf. There was a boot-shaped bruise rising on my cheek. "Jesus, Jake," she yelled, grabbing a tea towel and pressing it to my forehead, even though that wasn't where it hurt most. "What the hell happened? Where have you been?" I woke up and your bed was empty. I nearly called the police. Her voice blurred. I couldn't look at her. If I looked at her, I'd have to connect the person in the woods with the kid in her kitchen, and my brain was barely holding on to one identity at a time. Bathroom, I managed. Please. She stared at me, breathing hard. Then her eyes flicked to the clock, to the window, to the hallway behind me like she expected somebody else to follow. Don't you bloody move, she said, pointing with the towel. We're taking you to the hospital. There could be, I don't know, concussion or… Bathroom first, I said a bit sharper. Please, Mom. 5 minutes. She hesitated, then just nodded and stepped aside. I think the shock of how I looked had hit her too hard to start a proper fight. I locked the bathroom door and stripped my shirt off with shaking hands. There were bruises everywhere. Hoof marks on my ribs and thighs. Scratches on my arms. A purple swell around my left. That was going to be fun at school if I ever made it back there. And on my right shoulder, just above the blade, was a wound. The skin was torn in a rough circle about the size of a coin. The edges were ragged, but the center looked clean. Too clean. The flesh there wasn't raw and red like a new cut. It was pale, almost shiny like scar tissue. It pulsed. I leaned closer to the mirror. The edges of it moved, twitching. Then something in the center opened. It looked like a pore stretching at first. A little dark dot widening. But it kept widening. A moist, shining ring pulling back. By the time my brain realized what I was looking at, it was too late to lie to myself. It was an eye. A tiny eye embedded in my shoulder. Bloodshot, the white threaded with angry red lines. The iris was a muddy color somewhere between blue and brown, like it hadn't decided what it wanted to be. The pupil shrank when the bathroom light hit it. I felt that movement, like a muscle twitch under my skin. It hurt. Not sharp pain, just pressure. I stared at it. It stared back. We stayed like that for what felt like ages. My breathing got louder. My heart thumped. The eye followed the movement of my chest in the mirror, then flicked up to my own eyes, as if realizing there were more of its kind higher up. Mom, I called, voice thin. What? She shouted from the other side of the door. Yeah, we're going to hospital. The doctor didn't believe me. Not about the woods. Not about the deer. Definitely not about the mass in the tunnel. He barely believed me about the timeline. He poked me in places until I winced, shone a light into my real eyes, made me follow his fingers left and right. And this, my mom said, lifting my hospital gown at the back to show him my shoulder. He says he didn't have this yesterday. He leaned in. I felt his breath on my skin, damp and coffee stale. He prodded around the edges of the eye. It squeezed shut and I jolted. Hold still, he said. If you move, I'll think it's hurting you. It is hurting me, I snapped. He hummed under his breath, then straightened up and spoke in that tone adults use when they're trying to sound calm for your benefit. It's some kind of cyst, he said, or inclusion. Could be a birthmark that's changed, could be a benign growth. It looks vascular. Vascular, my mom repeated. A lot of blood vessels, he said. See those lines? That means it's well integrated into the tissue. Removal would be tricky. We'd need imaging. MRI, maybe. Could be it's wrapped around muscle. We don't want to hack at it and damage the shoulder. It's an eye, I said. He smiled like he hadn't heard me properly. I know it looks like that right now, but skin can do funny things. There are conditions where you get all sorts of growths that resemble. The eye opened under his fingers. I felt it track the movement of his hand, then dart to the torch he was holding. He stopped mid-sentence. He met my gaze. For a second, the mask slipped. Then he pasted it back on. We'll schedule a scan, he said briskly. In the meantime, keep it clean. Don't pick at it. And no more midnight adventures in the woods, all right? You're lucky you didn't break anything. My mom laughed weakly, like the whole thing was a joke. I closed my mouth before I told him everything. I knew, deep in my gut, what would happen if I did. I'd be the story, not the woods. The weird kid, the liar, the psych case. They did the MRI a week later. They made me lie still in a tube that sounded like it was being hit with hammers. My shoulder pressed painfully against the plastic. Afterwards, the same doctor came in with the images on a screen. He pointed to the cross sections like he was explaining a weather map. You see all this? He said, tracing the cluster of white lines around the eye. That's blood flow. It's using your vascular system. It's not just on the surface. It's wired in. So you're saying you can't cut it out, I said. Not safely, he replied. Not without risking serious damage. We can monitor it, though. If it changes, if it grows, or causes real pain, we'll revisit it. It's an extra fucking eye, I said. How much more real pain do you need? He gave me that look again. The one between sympathy and suspicion. Phantom sensations are common after trauma, he said. You've been through a scare. You'll be hyper-aware of any new thing on your body. That doesn't mean it's sentient. He didn't say alive. I noticed that. He avoided the word like it might stick to him. It didn't matter. I knew he was wrong. I knew it the first night I tried to sleep with it. I'd lie on my left side and feel it against the pillow, pressing back. The lid would slide shut when the room went dark. Slowly, like it was getting comfortable. If I turned the lamp on suddenly, it would snap open and the muscles at the back of my shoulder would clench. It reacted to sound. Laughter, shouting, certain words. If my mom and dad were arguing downstairs, it would twitch in time with their voices, the pupil flicking under the skin like it was trying to look in two directions at once. I got obsessed with testing it. I remembered something I'd seen on TV. That thing they do with paralyzed people where they blink once for yes, twice for no. I thought I could maybe turn my hitchhiker into something else. A witness, a guide, an apology line. I sat in my room with a notebook and the door locked, my shirt off, my shoulder angled toward the desk lamp. Okay, I said quietly. We'll try something. Blink once when I say the right letter, and we'll spell stuff, yeah? It stared, glossy and unblinking. I went through the alphabet, tapping each letter on the page as I said it out loud. A, B, C, D. Nothing. I tried again, slower, waiting between each one. A silence. B silence. C silence. D silence. By the time I hit J, my throat was dry. When I reached T, the eye closed. I stared at it. Was that? It opened again. No obvious pattern. Just a blink. Maybe it was dry. Maybe it was telling me to shut up. I tried questions instead. Is Tom alive? I whispered. 1 blink for yes. The eye stared. 2 for no. It blinked once. Then again. Then 3 times. No idem. No clear answer. Just movement. I try not to cry. It didn't work. My parents thought I was having nightmares about the deer or some shit, so they sent me to a counselor the school recommended. She had soft hair and soft eyes and a soft voice. Everything in her office was beige and pastel. She slid a box of tissues across the table on our first session like she already knew what category to put me in. So, she said, pen poised, tell me about the woods. I told her the clean version, the one with getting lost and falling and hitting my shoulder. I watched her face as I told it. She nodded in all the right places. When I got to the hospital bit, she underlined something on her page. And your friend? She asked lightly. Tom. I froze. Where did you hear that? I said, there's talk among the staff, she said gently. And the police liaison came in yesterday. They're looking for him, aren't they? My stomach clenched. Yeah, the police. They came the morning after. Sam's mom had called them when she'd found his bed empty and his dad's gun rack half open. Finn's foster parents didn't even notice he'd gone until the second day, when someone from school phoned to ask where he was. Our house got a visit because my mom, bless her, told one of the officers he's friend with a boy called Tom, I think. They go to the woods all the time. They sat me at the kitchen table with a glass of water I didn't drink and asked me to help them understand. Where did you last see him? One of them asked. She had her hair tied back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen everything. I lied at first. At Scouts, I said. Years ago. We haven't hung out much since. She looked at me like she could see the words sticking to my tongue. Jake, she said. His parents say you're one of his best mates. Yeah, well, his parents also think he still plays the trumpet. I snapped. She didn't rise to it. The sooner we know where he was last night, the sooner we can find him. His phone pinged by the woods behind Finn's house around 9. You live near there too, don't you? I cracked. I didn't tell them everything. Not the blue lights or the tunnel or the mass. I knew how that would sound, but I told them we planned to go camping by the lake, that we'd gone out there, that Tom had got spooked and turned back before we reached the water. Spooked by what? The other officer, a bloke with a mustache that didn't suit him, asked. The dark. I said, I don't know. He said he couldn't breathe. He legged it. We thought he'd gone home. It wasn't enough for them, obviously. They organized a search party. They had dogs. Proper ones, not the half-blind lab down the road. They combed the woods in low, methodical lines, fluorescent jackets flashing between the trees. They shouted his name a lot. Jake, the woman officer asked me later when they dragged us kids out again to walk the route. Can you show us where you were? I tried. I really did. I took them in through Finn's garden, through the broken fence slat. We walked straight, more or less. I thought I recognized a fallen tree here, a big rock there. But the more we walked, the more the place seemed to shift. Paths I was sure we'd taken weren't there. Clearings showed up where I didn't remember any. The lake wouldn't appear. The trees wouldn't thin. It's different, I said, eventually panicking. It's wrong. It wasn't like this. Forests can look very different in the dark, she said. Shadows change things. You might have got turned around. Yeah, I said, but what I meant was no. It's not just that. It doesn't want us to find it. Eventually we did reach a lake. Not the lake. A lake. It was smaller and shallower, with a picnic bench half sunk in the mud at one end. The officers exchanged looks like they'd found the place, like that ticked something off on their internal checklist. This where you camped as a kid? The man asked. No, I said. This is wrong. The one we went to wasn't. There were no benches. There was a pit. There were deer. There was. The woman laid a hand on my arm. Jake, she said, you've been through an ordeal. It's normal to be confused about details. They never found the tunnel. They never found the pit. They never found any sign of the mass or the herd or the lights. They didn't find Tom either. They found someone else once. One of the old scout leaders. Not Blue, the other one. He'd been missing for months. A dog dragged something out of the thicket. A boot with a foot still in it, and a mess of bone and cloth and gristle that used to be a man. They said foxes and time and exposure. They always say that. Those things eat more blame than they ever deserve. After that, they tightened a few restrictions around the woods. New fences, signs that said keep out and danger, unstable ground. Kids still went in. Of course they did. But we never went in together again. I saw Finn once more. Years later, college era, I was cutting through a side street behind the shopping center, the kind of alley nobody uses unless they're trying to avoid someone. It smelled like piss and old kebabs. At first, I thought the shape slumped against the wall was just a pile of rubbish bags. Then it moved. He looked up as I passed. It took me a second to recognize him. His hair was longer and dirty. His cheeks were hollowed out. There were sores at the corners of his mouth. A guy next to him was wiping vomit off his shirt with the kind of rough tenderness you only see between people who've hit rock bottom together. "Phone," I said. His eyes for a second cleared. He squinted like he was trying to pull my name out of a hat full of spiders. "Jake," he said eventually, voice raw. "You still got your friend?" My hand went instinctively to my shoulder. The eye twitched under my fingers. "Yeah," I said. He laughed, a short, bitter bark. "Figures." The other guy muttered something about time to move and hauled him up. Finn didn't look at me again. I thought about going after him, asking him if he'd seen any more lights, if his dreams were as bad as mine, if he'd ever gone back. I didn't. I watched him stagger away and then went home and drank until I couldn't remember the look on his face. Because that's the thing. That's the part that rots you from the inside. It's not just what happened that night. It's what you didn't do. I didn't go back with the police and insist they keep searching that exact patch of woods until they hit a tunnel. I didn't drag Sam back to the lake at gunpoint. I didn't tell the counselor the full story. I didn't force anyone to listen. I went quiet. I did what the woods wanted. Every year or so, there's a story in the local paper about a teen gone missing. Sometimes a younger kid, sometimes a dog, sometimes a grown man who went for a jog and didn't come back. The search parties go out. The same fluorescent jackets, the same dogs, the same tragic headlines when nothing turns up except maybe a shoe and some hopeful theories. I cut those articles out for a while, kept them in a shoebox under my bed. It felt like, I don't know, witnessing maybe proof that it wasn't just us, that whatever it is under those woods keeps reaching up, taking a little more each time. Then the box filled. I stopped adding to it. It didn't need any more proof. The eye never goes away. It cries sometimes. Not tears like the ones in your head. They're thicker. The wetness that seeps out stains my shirts if I don't wash them fast enough. The skin around it gets sore and raw. I wake up some nights with it stuck to the pillowcase and peel it free like a scab. It reacts to certain words. When people on TV say lost or trapped or help, it tightens the pupil shrinking. If someone mentions the woods, even if it's just background noise in a conversation at the pub, it twitches. I feel it like a tiny hand closing. I tried testing that too. I sat alone one night, drunk and stupid, and said, "Tom," out loud. The eye squeezed shut so hard it hurt. The muscles in my back spasmed. I had to bite down on a yell. I waited. It opened again slowly, the pupil wide, sucking in light. "I'm sorry," I told it. "I'm so fucking sorry." It didn't answer. Of course it didn't. Whatever's in there doesn't speak and blinks and taps. It speaks and screams through a wall of meat underground. I tell myself sometimes that maybe it's not Tom at all, that it's just a piece, a leftover from something else, that the bit of whatever burst out of the mass and hit my shoulder got stuck like shrapnel, nothing more. Some nights I believe that. Other nights I remember the way the lights moved, how they chose their new homes, how deliberate it felt. Maybe this one missed the pit. Maybe it missed the deer. Maybe it stuck in me because I was there, stupid and wide open, watching. Either way, it's here now. It read along as I wrote this, you know. I could feel it tracking the lines of text, the tiny movements under my skin as my hand scraped across the paper. When I got to the part in the tunnel, it started to leak. When I wrote your name, Tom, it burned. If somehow you're still in there, if some part of you is riding around with me like a hitchhiker pressed against the window, I don't know if hearing this helps or makes it worse. I don't even know who I'm talking to anymore. The you from before, or the you from the mass, or the you from the light that shot into the sky and never came back down. All I know is this. I pushed for us to go that night. I wanted something interesting to happen. I thought the worst thing that would come out of it was a story about some weird lights and maybe Sam shit himself in the bushes. I thought boredom was the enemy. I was wrong. I am sorry. That word feels small and useless and stupid, but it's all I've got. I'm sorry I hauled you deeper into something that didn't want to be understood. I'm sorry I left you wedged in that tunnel while I went chasing exits. I'm sorry I can't even find the place again to lay flowers, or carve your initials into a tree, or chuck rocks at the hole until it gives you back. I'm sorry the life I've tried to live in your name is such a mess, that most days I just drink until the guilt fuzzes at the edges and the eye on my shoulder droops like it's tired too. I'm sorry the best memorial I can give you is some story written in a shitty rented room with peeling wallpaper and a ceiling stain that looks like a map of the lake if you squint. But I had to tell it, because the woods aren't done. Even if the search parties stop, even if the headlines move on, that thing under the ground is still there, building itself, learning, filling husks, and stretching skin and plugging tunnels. It doesn't care if you believe in it. It doesn't need you to. It just needs you to walk far enough into the trees that nobody can see you anymore. If you're reading this and you've ever thought, I'll just cut through the woods, it's quicker, or let's sneak out tonight, it'll be fun, or I'm bored of this town, I want something weird to happen. Remember Tom. Remember the way the tunnels tightened around him. Remember the mouths and the eyes and the teeth. Remember the kids at Scouts who followed a fake gorilla suit into the dark and never came back. Remember that some places are empty on purpose. Some spaces in the world are gaps in the map because something underneath doesn't want to be looked at. And if you feel on the back of your neck a little gust of colder air in an otherwise still forest, and you hear something trying to whistle without lungs, and you see a light that doesn't shake or spill or behave like any torch you've ever seen, don't go toward it. Trust me, you're not missing anything worth seeing. The eye on my shoulder is staring at this line right now. The skin around it is wet. It doesn't blink when I write don't. It doesn't blink when I write go. It only starts to leak for real when I write your name again, Tom. So I'll stop. I'll put the pen down. I'll turn off the lamp. I'll roll onto my left side like I always do and pretend that feeling against the pillow is just a knot in my muscles, not somebody else's horror pressed to my bones. And I'll try again not to dream about blue lights sliding through the trees.